Maybe I didn't. Maybe I studied it and just remembering it 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Okay, we're going to be in Exodus 25. Yep. Deals and deal, you're not done yet. I needed to ask you questions. Do you remember? Do you know what? Well, hold on. Let's see. Dangling participle is dangling participle. The original states. These are things that we're gonna try to illustrate today. And the circumference and area of a hexagon. Circumference of a hexagon? Wait, what?
Are you okay?
No. I know he was looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" I don't know if they would. I don't know if they would learn. They would have to learn some of those things in English, but I don't know how in depth they go nowadays because we have tools and things that help us out and then guidelines that make sure that we're using the right research and all that. I don't know if they go into the. I don't know. Well, um, 25, and we might get to 31. This is when the Bible study starts kind of skipping around and get. It's trying to get. We I think we actually should be in the next book that we're supposed to be studying, but we're a little bit behind because we've had some things go on. Um, I think I was sick, and then there was other things going on, and then Brother Junior surgery, which he's doing well. We was talking a little bit about him earlier. He's sending people pictures of his his Bigfoot feet. Hey, children want to know where God is. Honestly, adults have trouble answering that question too. He is bigger than everything, yet the Bible usually speaks of God dwelling, acting, and speaking with humanity in a single location because of our limitations to time and space. Mm, this is the author talking, not Arthur. Author. He says, "I could be here now and somewhere else later." But God is always in both places. Eventually, God became a baby in a manger, a sacrifice on a cross, and a victor over the grave. Ultimately, though, he did not come simply to dwell with us, but to prepare us to dwell with him. That's a powerful thought when you think about it. He didn't just send us on this journey for nothing. And he didn't put his all into what his plan was without expecting a actual result, right? And the result that he's promised us is to be able to be in heaven with him, dwell amongst him. Ultimately, though, he did not come to simply dwell. That's the message of the tabernacle, and it still resonates today. As you dig into the session, spend time thanking God for coming to dwell among his people and for prayer, for preparing you to dwell among him someday. So what I was asking Davis and Dio says, why am I having to learn this stuff? And we've all been there in school. Why am I having to learn this stuff? I'll never use this. I'll never use it in real life. Every parent and teacher has heard this protest. Learning something you'll never use in real life can expand your mind into new areas of thinking or lead to new experiences you would never otherwise considered. Many people have stumbled into lifelong careers because they learned something I'll never use. Sometimes we find that we were able to use that information after all. And that's the topics that I was asking Davis and Deals about. Was dangling participle. It has something to do with grammar, and what the Bible study wants us to visualize as we are thinking about things is supposed to have like a whiteboard up here with those three topics, and then you guys are supposed to write down what you remember about those, if you guys remember anything. And the three deals are a dangling participle, the original states, and what I say earlier, the circumference and area of a hexagon. Now, if you guys know anything about me a little bit, just a little bit, I like math, and the area of a hexagon is divided up into 3 or 6 triangles. And the way you figure that out is you take the diameter and you half it, obviously, and then you make 3 little deals, but you figure up 3 triangles, then you times it by 2, and then to take the circumference, you'll be able to just use the diameter of the hexagon times pi, which is a universal deal for circles. But aside from all that, right, when we're talking about the math that's involved in there, how many of us would have ever thought that we would ever use that in any type of situation? I can't think of actually any math that I've used except to be smart amongst people. You guys remember the Pythagorean theorem? You guys know what that is? Anybody? So you take a right triangle, and the short side, or the two straight sides, you square them, and you'll be able to figure out the diagonal side, the long side. And I don't know that I've ever actually used that in practice. I just know that. It's something I picked up on in school. And that's what the Bible study author is talking about, is those knowledge things that we've learned in school. When we're learning them, when are we going to ever use them, right? Now, if you was maybe a science major or something like that, you might be able to figure out that, in chemistry, that certain elements, when combined together, can make toxic things, right? And they tell you that when you're in like home ec and when you're, I don't know, like using cleaning chemicals and stuff like that. Don't mix certain things because it'll make a gaseous, toxic substance that you can't inhale. But if you remember back in biology, oxygen, the way it's intaken into the body, if it's broken down, we actually don't use a whole lot of it, right? But our body likes certain types of oxygen more than others, and that's why carbon monoxide is so dangerous when we inhale it, because it can bond with the it's taken in easier by our body, but our body actually doesn't process it right, and so it starts creating toxic substances in our body. So when we inhale carbon monoxide, we're actually depriving our body of oxygen because it bonds with something else, and then we're filling our lungs with that carbon when it breaks it down, and so it becomes toxic to us.
And if you have problems exhaling when you breathe in just pure oxygen, and you don't exhale all of it correctly, then what holds in
Yep.
produces carbon.
Yeah, and that's the point. Is like, well, maybe we would have learned this if we'd have paid attention, or we'd be able to use it later on if we'd have held on to those things. And that's the point here when we're talking about the what God is setting up with the Israelites when he's rescued them and brought them out of a bad place. Now he's equipping them to be able to go forward and do new things and be able to learn new things. As described in the previous session, Exodus 24 recounts the ratification ceremony that formalized God's covenant with Israel. The incarnation had not yet occurred when the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. Neither had God's judgment fallen on his Son, so that the sanctuary curtain was torn and God's people given the chance to approach him directly. Only Israel's official representatives, especially Moses, could travel up to the mountain to meet with God. Nevertheless, what was happening at Sinai was a giant leap forward in God's redemptive plan. First, Moses came down and recited all of God's instructions to the people. For a second time, the people promised to obey God's commands fully. Then Moses wrote the instructions in the covenant scroll. The next event foreshadowed the climax of God's redemptive plan. Moses took Israel's official representatives up the mountain. God protected them during the experience, but Moses made it clear that they did experience the presence of God in that place. In fact, God hosted them to a meal. The statement, "they saw God," must be interpreted carefully in the context of Scripture. In Exodus, Moses asked to see God's glory. God allowed him to see only his passing presence because a face-to-face encounter would kill Moses. In the New Testament, John affirmed that no human has ever seen God, though Jesus revealed what the Father is like through his life on earth. John later wrote that when we do see him, we will be like him, and we will see him as he is. Although personal and limited encounters with God did occur before Christ, humans cannot gaze on the essence and totality of God in his glory. At least for now. When Jesus returns, our encounter with God will be more complete. Unlike Moses, the prophets, or any human, Jesus has seen God. Only he, who is God himself, can share with us his perfect and total knowledge of God. Only he can bring us to the climax of God's redemptive plan. To know him is to know the Father. And finally, between references to the stone tablets, Moses spent 40 days and nights on the mountain. During those weeks, he received God's detailed instructions for building the tabernacle and its furnishings. The Lord also outlined its operation and his expectations for the priests who would serve there. These directions are the focus for this study. So, as we're reading here, and like I said, we're supposed to be looking at the things. Who remembers anything about the original states? That's another deal that they wanted us to reflect on. And what are they talking about when they're talking about original states? I think it's a history deal, and it might be American history, because there's grammar, then there's math. I don't know if they're talking about science or history, because you guys know the three states, and then there's like transition states in science and of matter. You guys know anything? Yeah. See, I know that stuff, and for some reason I'm thinking of that. They could be talking about history, though. The 13 original colonies. You guys know that? Yeah. So
Your brain is just on overload this morning. It's just popping.
I never
All that
I,
stuff's popping back in.
I never liked history. What's the original states, Cora? She's in beta. She's supposed to be smart.
She's smart. I can't remember stuff like that.
See, she's younger than all of us, and she don't even remember. And she was like probably thinking the same things. When am I ever gonna use this stuff? Huh?
You got one. I got one.
What was the first state? How about that? Nope. Lost. It's Delaware. Um, God had done a lot to teach his people things they needed to know, both about him and about he expected them to live. Now he was ready to give them an object lesson that would remind them of his presence every day and his desire to have an ongoing relationship with them. There's a hymn that it wants us to read or recite, but I don't. Actually, it says Baptist hymnal. Is it in here? We'll have to learn this at some point. No, it's a different one. So, reading and picking up in verse 1 of Exodus chapter 25 says, The Lord spoke to Moses, Tell the Israelites to take an offering for me. You are to take my offering from everyone who is willing to give. This is the offering you are to receive from them. Gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, fine linen, and goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and fine leather, acacia wood, oil for the light, spices for the anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense, and onyx, along with other gemstones for mounting on the ephod and the breastpiece. The frequent use. So he's talking about how these next verse, or well, actually, all the way to some of these next chapters are divided, and how it's usually taught. But we're just going to jump into these verses that we're reading. Offering. The word can also be translated contribution. At the burning bush, God had promised that Pharaoh would free his people and that they would plunder Egypt in the process. That promise was fulfilled in Exodus 12. God had blessed Israel with all the resources they would need for their journey. Now he asked for anyone moved by gratitude to bring some of their possessions to be used in building the tabernacle. Most of these materials probably came from what the Egyptians forfeited after the Passover, though some could have come from trading with caravans in the Sinai. And it says the next part is, who is willing to give? Of course, God did not need the Israelites' stuff. Still, he gave them the privilege of contributing to his project as an act of worship and gratitude, which is humanity's highest purpose. Their so-called possessions were really all the Lord's, just as the land ultimately would belong to him. However, he would take only what was freely offered. The verb for willing to give suggests a voluntary gift. It is related to the free will offering. It is related to the free will offering. One of three fellowship offerings. The free will offering was surely on Paul's mind in 2 Corinthians chapters 8 and 9 when he described abundant joy in generosity and emphasized a cheerful giver, which if you guys don't know those verses, go and read them, because they are talking about how your attitude should be when you're talking about offerings or giving of your service, right? It's not expected. Even your tithing is a requirement, right? But the way you do it, the way you conduct yourself when you're doing that, it's not out of obligation, right? It's huh? Yes, that's a old word, but yes, it's generous. and you're not giving it because you have to. You're giving it because you want to, because you feel that gratitude, and that's what he's setting up in this part right here. Yeah. Not.
Takes me back to Ghost, the movie Ghost.
I haven't seen that in forever.
Okay, so like when Whoopi had that check and they were trying to take it, he's trying to give it to that nun, you know, and she just was hanging onto it.
Yeah. See that.
Like, take it away.
Yeah.
And he's like, let go of it, let go of it. That's blood money, that's blood money.
Yep.
And she's like, I am. Like that.
And ultimately, right, we might feel that same way when we're and I bring up tithing because it's something that we're all supposed to do, but when you're doing that, it might feel like that. It might feel like a struggle sometimes that you're wanting to give, but you have to remind you have to put it in your mind that you're doing it out of gratitude, and that you actually will feel that, because later on when you're reflecting on it, you're going to be glad that you did those things for what you're about to receive or what you are receiving, right? You're going to reflect back on those things that, hey, what God was doing in my life and what he was able to do then has allowed me to be able to get here, right? Because I'm listening to him, I'm obeying. That's exactly what he's trying to set up for the Israelites. So, and he goes in, he's going to go in and talk more specifically about the items that were being mentioned. It says gold, silver, and bronze, fine linen. The offering would include precious metals as well as colorful cloth. Terms like onyx and gemstones also describe a beautiful, rich setting fit for a king. The vibrant richness of the tabernacle and later temple spoke of the Lord's glorious beauty. The fine linen and blue, purple, and scarlet yarn would be used for the inner layer of the tabernacle, the courtyard, and the other priests' clothing. The olive oil and spices would be used to light lamps and prepare fragrant incense, which symbolized worship and prayer. And then talks about the wardrobe. It says these were part of the high priest's official wardrobe as he served in the tabernacle. Both of the pieces included special stones that signified the tribes of Israel. So moving on, it says, picking up and back in verse 8, they are to make a sanctuary for me so that I may dwell among them. You must make it according to all that I show you, the pattern of the tabernacle as well as the pattern of all its furnishings. The word for sanctuary, which is mikdash, comes from the root meaning to be holy. It is where God's people could encounter his holy presence. It first occurs in Exodus 15, what we already reviewed. This is the finale of Israel's songs of the Exodus. These verses could point to Israel's journey to Mount Sinai or to the tabernacle. However, the best explanation seems to point to an eternal sanctuary and a permanent divine gathering of the Lord's people. God revealed himself to the Israelites at Sinai, but his presence would draw even closer when he began to dwell among them. Previously, their understanding of his presence was limited to the mountain and to the pillar or the cloud that led them. But once his glory filled the tabernacle, he would reside within their camp. Putting his name on the tabernacle meant that it belonged to him. But his gracious hospitality would extend to all who would meet with him in humble submission. So he's not just doing this just to put something together. And that's a lot of critique when you hear people talk about not just the ancient times, but what the Bible really is, right? They critique it that it's just a book, that it's just put together. That's not so, and that's what he's demonstrating with the tabernacle is that he's creating a place so that they can go to him. In the same way, when he sacrificed himself on the cross, he was creating that path. He was creating that way for us to be able to recognize and live, because it was no longer confined to those things. It was freely given to everybody, and he was developing and showing that there's going to be another time when he returns to be able to have that experience with them. But it takes that faith and putting our faith and trust in him, that he's completing these things, that he's going to fulfill his promise to be able to experience that. And that's the same way with the rules that he was setting up with the Israelites, with the tabernacle and everything that's going to go on and that's involved in that. In Eden, God had provided close companionship with Adam and Eve. While he did not necessarily dwell with them, his presence with them was unmistakable. Sin shattered that connection, and while God appeared to his followers after Eden, he did not discuss dwelling with his people again until the tabernacle and later the temple. Yet, even with this was a shadow of his larger plan. Through Jesus, the Messiah, God came to dwell with humanity as a human being. The Word became flesh, and his presence continues to be experienced through the work of his Holy Spirit. One day, Eden will be completely reversed as Jesus brings his people back into uninterrupted fellowship with the Father. And again, those are references out of Revelation. Every detail of the tabernacle complex, including all its furnishings from the Ark of the Covenant to what the priests would wear, was designed by God. Nothing was left to human imagination. Everyone who came to the earthly tabernacle with fear and longing would recognize that they were entering God's presence, and their desire would be to stay there forever. The point, well, there's a reference here. It's not really, it's just historical stuff. But moving on through the verses, it says, the point of placing the tabernacle in the center of Israel's camp was that everything in their lives could revolve around his presence. They were to be God-centered. Sinai had been an opening between heaven and earth. In the future, this could be said of the tabernacle and then the temple. All biblical references to God's house refer to his earthly sanctuary. But Jesus' death and resurrection made all earthly sanctuaries obsolete. He is now God's tabernacle and the primary revelation of God's presence among his people. And so this could help us in trying to recognize what church should be today. Well, he set up for the Israelites, right? Everything was going to go on around it, and you can kind of see that it was getting sideways, so to speak, because when Jesus came on the scene, right, he started tearing things up. He started flipping things on its head, because they had turned the tabernacle, they had turned the temple into something that it wasn't supposed to be, because they started conducting everything. So when he says that it should be the focus, it should be the center of our life, we should treat our worship the same way. We should treat God the same way, is that everything we do is for him, and it should be that should be our goal, is to be more like him instead of I don't know, like the world, I guess, or whatever else. But it doesn't just involve today. It doesn't just involve Sunday school and Wednesday night Bible study and worship service and all that. It doesn't just have to matter then whenever you're out. That's what the Bible study author's trying to bring out, is that when Jesus came onto the scene and changed everything, right? Not literally just physically turning over tables and saying that the temple was no more. It's because Jesus is now that center. He's now that focus. He's the center of our attention, and that should be everything that we do around. That should be helping us, should be making sure that we're staying on point, right? And so even our jobs, even things that we do outside of the community, and for us as a church, right? What are we doing to help support that mission? What are we doing to be able to say that we're actually worshiping Him? That's what it means. That's what He's setting up for the Israelites then. That's what He's setting up for Israel now. Is that he's talking about it being the center of their life, not literally like just a building or a place that they conduct all their business, but literally what they should focus on and how they should be conducting themselves. And it's not just because he seen his people struggling. He wants a relationship with you, and that's even true today. That's why he sent his son to die for you. Was that he seen that humanity couldn't save themselves, and so he made a way for us to be able to have that relationship. And that's the whole plan that is being revealed way back in this time, but was ultimately come to fruition, right? And that's what He's promised us, is that He's going to come back to be able to fulfill the rest of that. That's what some of Revelation talks about, when the vision there is revealed to us, what His ultimate plan is. So we're not going to get to it right here, but there's a little bit more how God is setting up what kind of business should be done in the sanctuary, in the temple complex later on, what it's going to be referred to, and how He set up services and all that, and then the protocol for actually interacting with Him. There's a certain way that has to be followed, otherwise, and we all know, if the Bible study author said it, I mean, not anyone could just experience God's presence, and there had to be a way to be able to do some of that. And you had to go in with a clean heart. You had to be like Him, and that's the way it's going to be when we finally get to. I don't know if you caught that, what the Bible study author was leading up to. That's the way it's going to be when we actually get to see Jesus ourselves, or see God ourselves. We're going to see Him as He is, because we're going to be washed clean. You have to have that salvation experience with Jesus to be able to actually meet God, to be able to take your place, right? And so that's what the sacrifice of Jesus was that cleansing, was that there had to be a perfect sacrifice for us to be able to wash everything away, past, present, and future. It takes care of everything, but that's what it really means, because not just anyone can come into His presence. And so that's what is described in the last part of that. So we're gonna.
What I like about the 25, chapter 25, 22, because this is all before Jesus.
Mhm.
They knew that He was coming. They knew that He was coming, but it says, "And there I will meet with you, and I will speak with you from above the mercy seat." So yet they still could have that relationship,
Mhm.
because you had to go through a high priest. Your prayers had to be taken to the high priest before they could be spoken to God. But whenever your tabernacle is set up the way you're supposed to have it set up, just like here at church, you've heard many times there's a lot of prayers answered from
Mhm.
this church. Though we've never been humongous, we've never had an abundance of people. We've always been small. but yet God's heard our prayer.
Yep.
He's heard our prayer from these people here. I mean, it gives us something there to hang on to and hope, because these guys, they were hearing that there was someone coming, but at that time, just think, they didn't have a way to speak through to God through Jesus like we do today.
Yeah. Well, you can kind of tell it wasn't already. There's a whole plan to this, and that's what he was doing. He's setting it all up so that we can make it. So we can, because they're gonna have a lot of struggles, and our world today isn't done with the struggles.
And we're witnessing it today. People aren't turning to God. They're not turning to God.
Yep. So we're gonna stop right there. For those of you online, we're gonna be back in a little bit for our main worship service, and so we'll end it there. Brother Ken, would you dismiss us in a word of prayer, please?